there's a sense that the Fed is going to roll back or pull back on its bond purchases this fall. We have seen bond yields rise, translating to higher interest rates, particularly mortgage rates. I mean, how much higher do you see bond yields and therefore interest rates rising? Will it be enough to choke off growth even more?
So bond yields are rising because financial markets behave differently from economists. And I think that is something that has to be understood. Economists like to look at the journey and are very rational that the journey can take one step here, one step here, one step here. Financial markets look at terminal values, look at the destination, and ask themselves, what does the destination look like, and can I get there first? Because if you get to the right destination first, then that's where you want to be. So the minute that the Fed started talking about tapering, which was, I remember that day very well, May 22nd, and then it got confirmed on June 19th, you saw interest rates take off. And we have now priced in as a market a significant tapering starting as early as September. And that has got an impact. You're seeing the housing market weaken. House builders have gotten hit really hard on the equity market, and you're seeing the effect of that. Now, the Fed is trying to play defense. The first attempt to play defense was to talk back the tapering. The second attempt, which we should all stay tuned to, is it's going to use its second instrument to try to compensate for the effect of the first instrument. What is that second instrument? Experimental forward guidance. So what you're going to see now is the Fed attempting, again, because they have to convince people to do things, to use aggressive forward guidance in order to limit the impact of high interest rates. The one thing to remember, and this is really important, is that we are in a period where the Fed, again, not by choice but by necessity, is using experimental policies that have not been tested. It's like a doctor that gives you a medication because he or she has to do so that hasn't been clinically tested. And when that medication doesn't work well, like Sheila does, I'll give you a bit more of it. And it's not working any better, I'll give you a bit more of it, right? And that's why this notion of side effects is so important, and that's why the Fed is so concerned about this.
Mohamed, what happens when the Fed does begin to pull back its bond purchases? How is that going to impact the economy, assuming they do something this fall? Is it going to help? Is it going to hurt? Professor Taylor thinks we need to get back to normal faster than we are.
So we do need to get back to normal. I think it's going to take a long time to get back to normal. And John, I'm willing to wager that unless the other things happen, so unless the political system gets better at enhancing structural reforms, and unless the drag, the headwinds that we face from the rest of the world, okay, rates will be incredibly low, even in 2016. So I'll take you one step further. In the short term, what you're going to have is the following. The Fed purchases have inserted a wedge between sluggish fundamentals and asset values. And the reason why people like Sheila, John, and I worry is we worry that the behavior up here is inconsistent. People are taking too much risk. I remember Sheila, when she was at the FDIC, was very worried about the maturity mismatch that banks were taking as the Fed was forcing the long end of the curve down. That's important because the Fed cannot control the long end of the curve. They can control the short end of the curve, but not the long end. So what you're going to see is one or two things. Either the Fed's policy will work, low probability, but it may work. It will pull up the fundamentals, okay? And the Fed will taper for good reasons. Why? It doesn't need to press the accelerator so much. And to just echo what John said, this is not about hitting the brake. This is about taking the foot a little bit off the accelerator, right? Alternatively, and that's the risk we think is more probable, asset prices will come down to reflect the fundamentals. And when that happens, unfortunately, that becomes a drag on the economy. And that's the thing we worry about most.
To your point on that you think interest rates will still continue to be at zero until 2016, obviously the Fed has said that when it begins to taper purchases, it will keep zero interest rates in place until the labor market improves. My question is, are zero interest rates a trap? And I put this question to you with the backdrop of Japan. I mean, we're all talking about trying to unwind these policies. Japan has been the poster child for them. They've been pursuing quantitative easing and zero interest rates for 20 years now.
So at the risk of being controversial, okay, First of all, they are a trap, and John may not like that because I tell you we are in a liquidity trap. Okay, so they are a trap in that sense. Are they a trap in the sense that we are staying there, underestimating the impact? Well, then you've got to tell me what the counterfactual is. If the counterfactual is that other parts of policies will get the act together, then they are a trap. If they are discouraging, the moral hazard argument, they're discouraging because they're allowing politicians to be complacent because after all the economy is not in recession, it's growing at 2%, okay, then they are a trap. Okay? But if the alternative is absolutely no support for the economy, then they're not a trap because the counterfactual is much worse. And I just want to go back to this notion of what's happening underneath. I have a 10-year-old daughter, so I am particularly sensitive to the details of the unemployment report. And I look at two things among the many every Friday, first Friday. One is what is youth unemployment. 16 to 19-year-olds, so people who have left school, 16 to 19-year-olds, the unemployment is 25%. Now that's really important because at that age, if you remain unemployed for long, you become unemployable because there's a continuous entry into the labor force of people who are very much like you but haven't been sitting at home doing nothing. So an employer will tend to go to someone fresher. So that number, the longer it persists, so anything that can be done to support the economy and even better to make sure that we have the skill set would be better. The second number is the unemployment rate depending on what education you get. So the average 7.4%, and it's not a good average, but that's the measure that everybody sees. If you've got a college degree, it's 3%. If you haven't finished high school, it's 11%. Talk about something that contributes to persistent income inequality, it's right there.